What happens when the woman who thought she was the clever one finds legal documents at her door and realizes she's been the target all along? How did my secret life, my whispered jokes, and my little betrayals end up costing me everything? My home, my daughter, my reputation. This is the confession I never thought I'd have to make. My name is Ulalia Drake Harker, and 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was the insurance claims adjuster who could spot a lie from a mile away, the wife who deserved better than her boring husband, the mother who was setting an example of female empowerment for her daughter. I was so sure I was the smartest person in every room that I never noticed the trap being built around me, one careful piece of evidence at a time. The kitchen felt smaller every morning, like the walls were closing in with each cup of coffee Malcolm methodically prepared. He had this ritual: grind the beans, measure the water, set out my cup exactly 3 inches from the edge of the counter. Same spot, every day, for 12 years of marriage. Norah needs new cleats, he said without looking up from his lesson plans. Soccer season starts next week. I scrolled through my phone, checking the gym's class schedule. Cal was teaching the 7 p.m. session tonight. My pulse quickened just thinking about it. Can't you handle that? I've got the Henderson case eating up all my time. Malcolm's pen paused mid-stroke. The Henderson case? Big insurance fraud, could take weeks to unravel. The lie came so easily now. There was no Henderson case, but Malcolm didn't need to know that my evenings were better spent working on myself, my health, my happiness. A woman approaching 40 had to take care of herself. No one else would. "Mommy, are you coming to my game Saturday?" Norah bounced into the kitchen, backpack sliding off her shoulder. At 9, she still believed her parents were heroes, instead of 2 people slowly suffocating each other with routine and unmet expectations. "Of course, sweetheart." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. "Wouldn't miss it." Malcolm finally looked up. "Thought you said the case would take weeks." "I can spare a few hours for our daughter." I shot him a look that said, unlike some people who think lesson planning is more important than family time. Some things are more important than work. The irony wasn't lost on me, but Malcolm just nodded and returned to his papers. This was our life: careful words, polite distance, and the growing certainty that I deserved more than a man who got excited about teaching sophomores about symbolism in The Great Gatsby. My phone buzzed. A text from Cal. "Looking forward to tonight's session. Got some new moves to show you." Heat spread through my chest. When was the last time Malcolm had been excited to see me? When had he last looked at me like I was something special instead of just another item on his daily checklist? "I might be late tonight," I said, grabbing my gym bag from the counter. "This case is really complex." "How late?" Malcolm's voice was neutral, but something in his tone made me pause. "Not sure. Don't wait up." I kissed Norah goodbye and headed for the door, feeling lighter with each step away from the suffocating normalcy of our kitchen. But as I reached my car, I caught Malcolm's reflection in the window. He was standing at the kitchen sink, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not angry, not hurt. Something else. Something that made my stomach twist with unease. I shook it off. Malcolm was probably just jealous that I was taking charge of my life, while he remained stuck in the same predictable routine. Some people were content with mediocrity. I wasn't one of them. The gym smelled like possibility: sweat, rubber mats, and the faint trace of Cal's cologne that lingered near the free weights. He spotted me the moment I walked in, that slow smile spreading across his face like we shared a delicious secret. "There's my favorite client," he said, loud enough for others to hear, but with just enough intimacy to make me feel special. "Ready to work on those core exercises?" Cal was everything Malcolm wasn't: spontaneous, physical, present. When he adjusted my form, his hands were confident and sure. When he laughed at my jokes, it was genuine, not the polite chuckle Malcolm gave when he was grading papers in his head. "You seem tense," Cal observed as I struggled through my 3rd set of planks. "Everything okay at home?" I let myself collapse onto the mat, breathing hard. Just the usual. Husband thinks I'm neglecting my duties. I made air quotes around the word duties, and Cal's eyebrows shot up. Duties? What is this, the 1950s? Tell me about it. God forbid I want to take care of myself for once. The words felt good coming out, like releasing pressure from a valve. He acts like going to the gym is some kind of betrayal. Cal handed me a towel, his fingers brushing mine. Sounds like someone's intimidated by his wife's transformation. Transformation. I like that word. It made my evening workouts sound purposeful, important, instead of what Malcolm probably saw them as, an escape from responsibility. Want to grab a smoothie after? Cal asked. I know a place. The bistro cafe was trendy in the way that made me feel younger, hipper than my suburban mum life usually allowed. Cal knew the barista by name, ordered something with kale and protein powder like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt sophisticated sitting across from him, talking about fitness goals and life dreams instead of soccer schedules and grocery lists. You're different from most of my married clients, he said, leaning back in his chair. Most of them just go through the motions. You actually want to grow. I practically glowed under his attention. When was the last time someone had seen potential in me instead of just obligation? My phone buzzed. Malcolm, where are you? Norah's asking about bedtime story. I typed back quickly. Still working. Start without me. Work emergency? Cal asked with a knowing smile. Something like that. I silenced my phone and slipped it into my purse. Where were we? We talked until the cafe started closing, about books and travel and all the things I used to dream about before marriage and motherhood had narrowed my world to insurance claims and parent-teacher conferences. Cal had been to Thailand, spoke basic Spanish, read philosophy for fun. He made me remember the version of myself that had existed before I became Malcolm's wife and Norah's mother. When I finally got home, the house was dark, except for the porch light Malcolm always left on. I found him in his study, still grading papers at nearly midnight. How was work? He asked without looking up. Productive. I hovered in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Did Norah go down okay? Eventually. She wanted to know why Mommy's work was more important than story time. The guilt hit like a physical blow, but I pushed it away. I'm providing for this family. Someone has to take the difficult cases. Malcolm's pen stopped moving. The Henderson case. Right. He was quiet for so long I thought the conversation was over. Then, funny thing about insurance fraud cases, usually there's a paper trail, files, evidence. My mouth went dry. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Malcolm finally looked up and there was something different in his eyes, something calculating. Just thinking out loud. I went to bed feeling unsettled, but by morning, the feeling had faded. Malcolm was just being Malcolm. Overthinking, suspicious, unable to trust that his wife might actually be good at her job. Some people saw conspiracy, where others saw competence. At breakfast, my phone lit up with a text from Cal. Great session last night. When can we do it again? I smiled despite myself, and when I looked up, Malcolm was watching me again with that same unreadable expression. Good news about the case? He asked mildly. Getting closer to a breakthrough, I said, which wasn't technically a lie. I was definitely breaking through something, the suffocating boundaries of my old life. The insurance office buzzed with its usual controlled chaos, but I felt like I was floating above it all. 3 weeks of regular sessions with Cal had given me a confidence I'd forgotten I possessed. I walked taller, laughed easier, felt more alive than I had in years. Someone's glowing, Janet Lynn observed as she passed my cubicle. New skincare routine? Just taking better care of myself, I replied, which was true enough. Self-care came in many forms, and if mine happened to include the undivided attention of a gorgeous personal trainer, well, that was nobody's business but mine. Janet lingered by my desk, lowering her voice. Everything okay with Malcolm? You've been working a lot of overtime lately. I minimized the yoga class schedule I'd been browsing and pulled up a random case file. Big fraud investigation. You know how it is. Which case? Maybe I can help. My heart skipped. Henderson, it's complicated. Probably better if I handle it alone. Janet frowned. Henderson? I don't remember seeing that file come through. New client. Direct referral. The lies were getting easier, flowing like water around any obstacle. Very sensitive. Management wants it kept quiet. After Janet left, I spent the next hour creating a fake Henderson file, just enough documentation to make it look legitimate if anyone asked questions. It was amazing how simple it was to manufacture a paper trail when you understood the system from the inside. My phone buzzed with a text from Cal. Free for lunch? Found a new place I want to show you. I glanced around the office, then typed back, can't today. Too much work. His response was immediate. All work and no play. Come on, you deserve a break. He was right. I did deserve a break. I'd been working at this company for 8 years, never took sick days, always went above and beyond. If I wanted to take a long lunch, that was my prerogative. Okay, but just for an hour. The new place was a wine bar downtown, intimate and dimly lit even in the middle of the day. Cal had already claimed a corner booth, 2 glasses of something expensive waiting on the table. This is very lunch-like, I said, sliding into the booth. You looked stressed this morning. Thought you could use some real relaxation. His smile was warm, concerned. Tell me what's going on. So I did. About Malcolm's suspicious questions, his sudden interest in my work schedule, the way he watched me like he was solving some puzzle. Cal listened with the kind of focused attention that made me feel heard, understood, valued. Sounds like control issues, he said when I finished. Some men can't handle their wives having independence. It's not even about independence. It's about basic respect. I'm a grown woman. I shouldn't have to account for every minute of my day. Exactly. Cal reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're amazing, Ulalia. Smart, beautiful, successful. Any man should feel lucky to have you. The wine made everything softer around the edges, Cal's words wrapping around me like a warm blanket. When he suggested we skip dessert and go for a drive, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. We ended up at a scenic overlook outside town, talking and laughing until the afternoon sun slanted low through the windshield. Cal's hand found mine again, and this time I didn't pull away. I should go, I said, but I didn't move. Should is a dangerous word, he murmured. What do you want to do? What I wanted was to stay in this moment forever, feeling desired and appreciated and alive. What I wanted was to forget about insurance claims and soccer practices and the growing distance between me and my husband. What I wanted was to be selfish for once in my adult life. So I kissed him. It was supposed to be just once, just a moment of rebellion against the careful boundaries of my suburban existence. But Cal kissed me back like I was something precious, something worth fighting for, and suddenly once wasn't nearly enough. By the time I got back to the office, it was almost 5. I'd missed 3 calls from Malcolm and a meeting with my supervisor. Janet shot me a concerned look as I hurried to my desk. Where have you been? Morrison was looking for you. Henderson case, I said automatically. Had to interview a witness downtown. Took longer than expected. Your phone was going straight to voicemail. Dead battery. I held up my phone as proof, grateful that it actually had died sometime during the afternoon. What did Morrison want? Just checking on your caseload. Said your billable hours have been inconsistent lately. My stomach dropped. Inconsistent how? I don't know. Something about overtime claims not matching your keycard logs. Janet's expression was worried now. Ulalia, is everything okay? Really? Everything's fine, I said, but my hands were shaking as I gathered my things. Just fine. The drive home felt endless, my mind racing through possible explanations. So what if I'd been flexible with my schedule lately? I was a salaried employee, not a factory worker punching a time clock. If I wanted to work from home sometimes, or take a long lunch and make up the time later, that was between me and my productivity metrics. I found Malcolm in his study again, surrounded by stacks of papers that definitely weren't lesson plans. When he looked up, his expression was neutral, almost pleasant. "How was the Henderson case today?" he asked. "Good, making progress." I hovered in the doorway, trying to see what he was working on. "What's all this?" "Just organizing some files, financial stuff. You know how it is." But I didn't know. In 12 years of marriage, Malcolm had never been interested in our finances, beyond making sure the bills got paid. That was my department, along with everything else that required actual attention to detail. "Anything I should know about?" I asked. "Nothing urgent, just want to make sure we're prepared for the future." He smiled, and there was something cold about it that made my skin crawl. You never know what might happen. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Malcolm breathed steadily beside me. My lips still tingled from Cal's kiss, my body humming with the memory of feeling wanted. But underneath the excitement was a growing unease, like the moment before a storm, when the air pressure drops and every animal instinct screams, "Run." I was being paranoid. Malcolm was just going through one of his phases, probably triggered by some midlife crisis about turning 40 next year. Men his age started questioning everything, their careers, their marriages, their purpose. It had nothing to do with me, but as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the image of Malcolm's smile, or the way he'd said, "You never know what might happen," like he was looking forward to finding out. The bistro was crowded for a Thursday night, filled with Cal's usual crowd of fitness enthusiasts, and 20-somethings who still thought life was one big adventure. I felt glamorous sitting at their table, laughing at stories about rock climbing and weekend trips to music festivals. These people lived in the moment, embraced spontaneity, didn't spend their evenings grading papers or worrying about mortgage payments. "Eulalia's married to a teacher," Cal announced to the group, his hand resting casually on my shoulder. "High school English. Can you imagine anything more boring?" Everyone laughed, and I found myself laughing along. It felt good to be the sophisticated woman slumming it with her dull husband, instead of the neglected wife grateful for scraps of attention. "What does he teach?" asked Meredith, a yoga instructor with perfect cheekbones and the kind of effortless style I'd given up on years ago. "The Great Gatsby, Romeo and Juliet, the classics." I made my voice deliberately flat, academic. Same curriculum every year, same discussions about symbolism and themes. He actually gets excited about lesson planning. "Oh God," Meredith wrinkled her nose. "How do you stand it?" "I don't, mostly." The wine was making me bold, reckless. I mean, we're basically roommates at this point. He has his books. I have my life. It works. Cal's thumb traced small circles on my shoulder. "Eulalia's too dynamic for that kind of suburban prison. She needs someone who can keep up with her." The implication hung in the air like incense, sweet and intoxicating. I was leaning into Cal's touch, basking in the group's attention, when I saw him. Malcolm stood near the bar, still wearing his work clothes, scanning the crowded restaurant with systematic precision. When his eyes found me, his expression didn't change. He just walked over, weaving between tables with the same methodical patience he brought to everything else. "Malcolm!" I jumped up too quickly, nearly knocking over my wine glass. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for my wife." His voice was calm, conversational. Norah had a nightmare. Wanted her mother. The group had gone quiet, sensing drama. Cal stood up slowly, and I noticed for the first time how much taller Malcolm was, how much broader through the shoulders, despite his bookish exterior. "This is my husband," I said to the table, my voice pitched too high. "Malcolm, these are my friends from the gym." "Friends?" Malcolm nodded politely. I see. Join us, Meredith chirped, probably hoping for entertainment. We were just hearing about your teaching. Were you? Malcolm's gaze moved from face to face, cataloguing details. What did Ulalia tell you? The question was innocent enough, but something in his tone made my chest tighten. Just that you're passionate about literature. Very dedicated to your students. Dedicated. Malcolm smiled, and it was the same cold smile from his study. That's one word for it. Cal cleared his throat. Maybe we should give you two some privacy. No need. Malcolm pulled out his phone, started typing something. I just wanted to make sure I had the right place. The Bistro Cafe on 5th Street, table 12, Thursday night at 9:47 p.m. What are you doing? I demanded. Taking notes. He pocketed the phone and looked directly at Cal. You must be the personal trainer. Cal Finch. Cal extended his hand with forced confidence. Pleasure to meet you. Malcolm stared at the offered hand for a long moment before shaking it. I'm sure it is. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. I could feel the other tables watching us, phones being discreetly angled in our direction. This was exactly the kind of scene I'd been trying to avoid. Malcolm, you're embarrassing me, I hissed. Am I? He tilted his head like he was genuinely curious. How so? Showing up here, acting paranoid. Paranoid. He repeated the word like he was testing its flavor. Interesting choice. Cal stepped closer, his chest puffed out in a display of masculine protection that would have been thrilling under different circumstances. Look, man, I think you should... Should what? Malcolm's voice remained perfectly level, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What exactly do you think I should do? Maybe not harass your wife in public? Cal's voice rose, drawing more attention. She's an adult. She can have friends. Friends? Malcolm nodded slowly. Is that what we're calling it? What's that supposed to mean? Cal demanded. Malcolm pulled out his phone again, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward our table. This is my wife's timesheet from last Tuesday. Shows her working until 9 p.m. on the Henderson insurance fraud case. He swiped to another screen. This is her keycard log from the same day. Shows her leaving the office at 2:15 p.m. My blood turned to ice water. This is her credit card statement from Tuesday night. Charges at this restaurant and the Marriott downtown. He looked up at Cal with those cold, calculating eyes. Would you like to explain how someone investigates insurance fraud at a hotel bar? Malcolm, I started, but he held up a hand. I'm not finished. He swiped to another screen. This is a photo from your Instagram story, Cal. Posted Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Location tagged as the Marriott Lounge. He turned the phone toward the table again. That's my wife in the background, isn't it? The silence was deafening. I could hear my pulse in my ears, see phones being raised around us as other diners realized they were witnessing a full-scale marital meltdown. Cal's face had gone red. You're stalking your own wife? That's sick, man. Stalking. Malcolm pocketed his phone and smiled that terrible smile. No, that's called being married to someone who thinks she's smarter than everyone else. You bastard! Cal lunged forward, shoving Malcolm hard enough to send him stumbling backward. It was exactly the wrong move. Malcolm didn't fight back, didn't even raise his hands to defend himself. He just absorbed the shove, regained his balance, and looked around the restaurant with the expression of someone confirming that, yes, everyone was watching. Did everyone see that? He called out to the room. I'm going to need witnesses. Someone was already calling 911. Multiple phones were recording. The manager was rushing over, and I could see our entire disaster being uploaded to social media in real time. Cal realized his mistake too late. Shit, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Malcolm straightened his shirt, perfectly calm. You meant every bit of it. The police arrived within minutes, by which time the videos were already going viral. Teacher V's trainer was trending before we even left the restaurant. I watched my carefully constructed secret life explode across the internet in high definition, complete with my shocked expression and Cal's obvious guilt. Malcolm gave his statement with the same methodical precision he brought to grading papers, providing names, dates, and documentation like he'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, which I was beginning to realize he probably had been. As the police led Cal away for assault charges, Malcolm turned to me one last time. "Norah's at my mother's," he said quietly. "I suggest you find somewhere else to sleep tonight." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the wreckage of my reputation with a crowd of strangers and their cameras, finally understanding that I'd never been the smart one in this marriage at all. The video had been viewed 2.3 million times by morning. Cheating wife exposed by genius husband was the most popular version, though teacher destroys, lying wife with receipts was gaining ground. The comments were brutal, creative, and absolutely deserved, according to the court of public opinion. I'd spent the night at my mother's house, crying into her Egyptian cotton pillowcases, while she made disapproving noises about Malcolm's vindictive nature. But even Vivian seemed shaken by the methodical way he'd dismantled my lies in front of a restaurant full of witnesses. "He planned this," I kept saying. "He set me up." "Of course he did, darling." Mom rubbed my back like I was 9 years old again. Men can't handle being outmaneuvered by superior women. They have to resort to these elaborate revenge fantasies. But deep down, I knew it wasn't revenge, it was justice. Malcolm had simply done what I'd thought I was doing, stayed 3 steps ahead of his opponent. The difference was, he'd actually been smart enough to pull it off. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Friend requests from strangers, interview requests from local news stations, messages from high school acquaintances who'd suddenly remembered my existence. The worst ones were from people I actually knew. "Janet, is this really you in the video? Call me." My sister. "Mum told me what happened. Are you okay?" Even my boss. "We need to talk. Monday morning. Don't be late." But there was nothing from the one person I desperately wanted to hear from. Cal had been released on bail, but his phone went straight to voicemail. His Instagram was suddenly private. When I drove by the gym, his car wasn't in the parking lot. By Sunday, I couldn't avoid reality any longer. I had to go home and face whatever Malcolm had waiting for me. The house looked the same from the outside, but when I tried my key, it didn't work. I rang the doorbell like a stranger. Malcolm answered after a long moment, looking rested and calm. Behind him, I could hear Norah's laughter and the sound of cartoon voices from the TV. "Is that Mommy?" Norah called out. "Yes, sweetheart, stay in the living room." Malcolm stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "We need to talk." "I live here," I said. "Let me in." "Actually, you don't. Not anymore." He handed me a manila envelope. "Divorce papers, temporary restraining order, custody petition. Your belongings are packed in the garage." My hand shook as I opened the envelope. The documents were thick, official, terrifyingly comprehensive. "You can't do this. You can't keep me from my daughter." "I'm not keeping you from anything. The court is, pending a fitness evaluation." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was explaining a homework assignment. "Turns out judges don't look favorably on mothers who lie about their whereabouts and spend their children's college funds on hotel rooms." But even as I started to protest, I remembered the credit card charges, the overtime pay I'd claimed for hours I'd spent with Cal. It wasn't that much money. $1,800 over 6 weeks, plus the fraudulent overtime claims totaling another $3,000. Malcolm tilted his head in that infuriating way. "But you're right, it's not about the money." "Then what is it about?" "It's about Norah coming home from school to find her mother gone with no explanation. It's about her asking why Mommy doesn't read bedtime stories anymore. It's about her teacher calling to say she's been distracted and anxious in class." His calm finally cracked, just a little. "It's about you choosing a stranger over your family and thinking you were clever enough to get away with it." The words hit like physical blows. I never meant for Norah to be hurt. But she was hurt, because you were too busy playing victim to notice that your actions have consequences. Malcolm stepped back toward the door. You have supervised visitation on Wednesday evenings and Saturday afternoons. Don't be late. Malcolm, please. I tried to save this marriage, Ulalia. I tried talking to you, tried giving you space, tried ignoring the obvious signs because I wanted to believe you'd come to your senses. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. But you were so convinced you were the smartest person in the room that you never noticed I was documenting everything. Documenting everything? Phone records, credit card statements, your fake overtime claims, the Henderson case that doesn't exist. His smile was sad now instead of cold. Did you really think I wouldn't check? I'm a teacher, Ulalia. I know what academic dishonesty looks like. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone on the porch with my legal papers and my packed belongings. Through the window, I could see Norah curled up on the couch, watching cartoons like her world hadn't just imploded. Maybe it hadn't, for her. Maybe Malcolm was right, and I'd been so focused on my own happiness that I'd missed what really mattered. Monday morning brought fresh humiliation. Morrison called me into his office before I'd even reached my desk, Janet avoiding eye contact as I walked past her cubicle. Sit down, Ulalia. Morrison's expression was grim. We need to discuss some irregularities in your timesheets. The investigation was thorough and devastating. Every fake overtime claim, every long lunch disguised as client work, every lie I'd told to cover my tracks. They had it all, documented with the kind of precision that suggested someone had been feeding them information. Did Malcolm call you? I asked when the evidence became overwhelming. Your husband? No. Morrison frowned. Why would he call us? Then how did you— Anonymous tip, someone who was concerned about potential fraud. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Look, Ulalia, I've known you for 8 years. This isn't like you. If there are problems at home, if you need help— I don't need help, I said automatically. I need my job. But it was too late for that. The termination was immediate, effective immediately, with cause. No severance, no references, no second chances. My keycard was deactivated before I finished cleaning out my desk. Janet walked me to the parking garage, her face tight with sympathy and embarrassment. I'm sorry, she said when we reached my car. I really hoped it wasn't true. What wasn't true? The rumors about you and the trainer. She looked away. Some of us suspected, but we hoped you were just going through a rough patch. You all knew. Not knew. Suspected. You were different these last few months. Secretive. Distracted. Janet's voice was gentle but firm. We wanted to help, but you kept pushing us away. I drove home, to my mother's house, since I apparently didn't have a home anymore, in a daze. The radio was playing some cheerful pop song about living your best life, and I wanted to scream at the irony. My phone rang as I pulled into Mum's driveway. Unknown number. Mrs. Harker, this is Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your side of the story about the restaurant incident. Would you be available for an interview? I hung up without answering, but the calls kept coming. Local news, online gossip sites, even a producer from a daytime talk show who wanted to book me for a segment about social media justice. Everyone wanted to hear from the woman who'd been publicly destroyed by her own husband, the cautionary tale about modern infidelity in the digital age. But there was still no word from Cal. By Wednesday, I was desperate enough to show up at the gym during his usual shift. The desk clerk, a perky 19-year-old named Ashley, looked at me like I was a dangerous animal. Cal's not working here anymore, she said carefully. He resigned. Resigned? When? Friday. Right after— She gestured vaguely, presumably toward my public humiliation. Look, Mrs. Harker, maybe you should— Where did he go? I can't give out that information, but honestly, I think he moved back to California. His lease was up anyway. And after all the negative attention, Ashley's expression was sympathetic but firm. Maybe it's better this way. I wanted to argue, to demand Cal's forwarding address, to insist that what we had was real and worth fighting for. But standing in the gym where it all started, surrounded by the same mirrors that had reflected back my transformation, I finally saw myself clearly. I wasn't the sophisticated woman having a justified affair with a younger man. I was a middle-aged mother who'd blown up her life for someone who'd disappeared the moment things got complicated. I wasn't the victim of a controlling husband's revenge fantasy. I was the architect of my own destruction, too arrogant to see the trap I'd built around myself. The supervised visitation that evening was agony. Norah was polite but distant, like I was a friendly stranger instead of her mother. Malcolm sat in the corner of the McDonald's play place, reading a book and pretending not to listen to our stilted conversation. "How's school, sweetheart?" I asked. "Good. Mrs. Peterson says I'm doing better in math." "That's wonderful. I always knew you were smart." Norah nodded and went back to her chicken nuggets. The easy intimacy we'd once shared was gone, replaced by the careful politeness of people who didn't quite trust each other anymore. When the 2 hours were up, Malcolm closed his book and stood. "Time to go, Norah." "Can I see Mommy tomorrow?" she asked, and the hope in her voice nearly broke me. "Saturday," Malcolm said gently. "Remember? We talked about the schedule." As they walked away, Norah's small hand in her father's larger one, I finally understood what I'd really lost. It wasn't just my marriage or my job or my reputation. It was my daughter's unconditional love, the trust that could never be fully rebuilt, the family I'd taken for granted while chasing something that had never been real in the first place. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and broken dreams. I sat at the defendant's table with my lawyer, a tired-looking public defender who'd been assigned to my case when I couldn't afford anyone better, watching Malcolm's attorney arrange stacks of evidence with military precision. "Mrs. Harker," Judge Patricia Reeves looked at me over her reading glasses with the expression of someone who'd seen this story too many times. "I've reviewed the documentation submitted by both parties. This is quite extensive." Extensive didn't begin to cover it. Malcolm's legal team had assembled a timeline of my affair that was more detailed than most criminal investigations. Phone records showing hundreds of texts to Cal's number. Credit card statements highlighting every suspicious charge. Screenshots of social media posts that contradicted my claimed whereabouts. Even testimony from Norah's school counselor about her declining emotional state. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, "my client acknowledges that she made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" Malcolm's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Walsh, stood up. "Your Honor, we're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about systematic deception, financial fraud, and willful abandonment of parental responsibilities." Walsh clicked through a PowerPoint presentation that turned my last 3 months into a case study in marital betrayal. Every lie I'd told was there, cross-referenced with documentary evidence. Every moment I'd chosen Cal over my family was highlighted in stark black and white. The defendant claimed to be working overtime on a case called Henderson, Walsh continued. "Our investigation found no such case exists. She fraudulently claimed over $3,000 in overtime pay while actually engaged in an extramarital affair." "I was going through a difficult time," I said, my voice barely audible. I wasn't thinking clearly. "Weren't you?" Walsh turned to face me. "Because this evidence suggests quite the opposite. This suggests someone who was thinking very clearly about how to deceive her husband and daughter while pursuing her own interests." She clicked to a new slide showing my gym membership records. The defendant joined Fitness First in January, specifically requesting sessions with Mr. Finch. She upgraded to premium membership in March, adding services she couldn't afford. She lied about working late to attend evening classes that don't appear on any gym schedule. Each revelation felt like a physical blow. I'd thought I was being so clever, so careful. But looking at the evidence laid out in chronological order, My deception looked pathetic instead of sophisticated, desperate instead of empowered. What about the father's behavior? My lawyer asked weakly. Surveilling his wife, documenting her activities without her knowledge, protecting his interests and his child, Walsh shot back. Mr. Harker suspected infidelity and gathered evidence like any reasonable person would. He didn't hire investigators or violate any privacy laws. He simply paid attention to his wife's public activities and documented the inconsistencies in her stories. Judge Reeves looked at Malcolm, who sat quietly in the gallery with his mother and brother. Mr. Harker, do you wish to make a statement? Malcolm stood, and for a moment I hoped he might show mercy, might acknowledge that we'd once loved each other enough to build a life together. Your Honor, I don't want to punish my wife. I want to protect my daughter. His voice was steady, matter of fact. Norah has been through enough instability. She needs consistency, honesty, and a parent who puts her needs first. And you don't believe Mrs. Harker can provide that? Malcolm looked directly at me for the first time all day. I believe my wife is capable of change, Your Honor, but I also believe that actions have consequences, and trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. I understand. Judge Reeves shuffled through the papers one more time. Mrs. Harker, do you have anything to say before I render my decision? I stood on shaking legs, my mind blank. What could I say? That I was sorry, that I'd made mistakes, that I deserved another chance. All of it was true, but none of it mattered now. The evidence spoke louder than any apology I could offer. I love my daughter, I finally managed. That's the only thing I need you to know. I love Norah, and I want what's best for her. I believe you do, the judge said kindly. But love isn't always enough to overcome poor judgment. The ruling was swift and comprehensive. Malcolm was granted primary custody, with me receiving supervised visitation twice a week, pending completion of counseling and parenting classes. The marital assets would be divided, but I'd be responsible for reimbursing the fraudulent overtime pay and covering my own legal fees. The restraining order would remain in effect until the divorce was finalized. This court recognizes that families can heal from betrayal, Judge Reeves said in closing, but healing requires accountability, not just remorse. Mrs. Harker, I encourage you to use this time to reflect on the choices that brought you here and to focus on becoming the mother your daughter deserves. As the courtroom emptied, I sat alone at the defendant's table, watching Malcolm gather his papers with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. His mother approached me cautiously, her expression more sad than angry. Ulalia, Gina Harker said quietly, I want you to know that we don't hate you. We're disappointed, but we don't hate you. Thank you, I whispered, though I wasn't sure why she was being kind to me. Norah asks about you. She misses you. Gina's voice was careful, measured. If you do the work, if you really change, there might be a way back. Not to the marriage, that's over, but to being the mother she needs. After they left, I remained in the empty courtroom for a long time, staring at the judge's bench where my life had been officially dismantled. 6 months ago, I'd thought I was the smartest person in every room, the woman who deserved better than her boring husband and predictable life. I'd been so certain that I was the victim, the one being held back by other people's expectations and limitations. Now I understood that I'd been the villain of my own story all along. Not because I'd fallen out of love with Malcolm, or even because I'd been attracted to someone else, but because I'd chosen deception over honesty, selfishness over responsibility, and fantasy over the messy reality of being a wife and mother. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career investigating insurance fraud, spotting the telltale signs of people who thought they were clever enough to game the system. I knew exactly how these stories ended, with the fraudsters exposed, humiliated, and facing consequences they'd never seen coming. I just never thought I'd be stupid enough to become one of them. As I walked out of the courthouse into the harsh afternoon sunlight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Cal, finally reaching out to explain his disappearance or apologize for abandoning me when things got difficult. Instead, it was a message from a debt collection agency. Apparently, Cal had left town with several unpaid bills, including the hotel charges from our afternoons together. As his associate, I was being contacted about potential payment arrangements. I laughed out loud, standing there on the courthouse steps with my legal papers and my shattered life, because of course, that's how this story would end. Not with romantic tragedy or noble sacrifice, but with a bill for services rendered and a phone number to call if I wanted to set up a payment plan. The woman who thought she was the clever one had been played by everyone. Her husband, her lover, and most of all, herself. And the saddest part was, I'd done it all for free. 6 months later, I'm writing this confession from a studio apartment across town, working a part-time job at an insurance company that doesn't know about my termination. I see Norah twice a week under supervision, and slowly, carefully, we're rebuilding something that might eventually resemble trust. I'm in therapy now, court-mandated but genuinely helpful, learning to recognize the difference between explanation and excuse, between self-care and selfishness, between being smart and being wise. The therapist says healing is possible, but it requires facing the truth about who I really was during those months when I thought I was becoming someone better. The truth is, I was never the victim of a controlling husband or a boring marriage. I was a woman who chose the easy lie over the difficult conversation, who picked fantasy over responsibility, who convinced herself that she deserved happiness at any cost. Malcolm was right about one thing. I thought I was the smartest person in the room. But intelligence without wisdom is just elaborate stupidity, and wisdom, I'm learning, comes from accepting that sometimes the most important person to outsmart is yourself. This is my confession from the other side of the table, the side where the clever ones end up when their cleverness finally runs out.